Okay, welcome back, American Experience. So we're going to start tying some of these kind of seemingly disjointed pieces of puzzle together. We are going to talk about colonization today and how we transition to the Continental Congress as a result of colonization. So when we left off, we were talking about Mesoamerican civilizations, pre-Columbian civilizations that were brought down at the hands of Cortez and Pizarro. And we read an article and are listening to a piece in video form about Columbus and kind of the consequence of Europeans' understanding of what was out there. So today we're going to make this transition to Columbus and our what will become the United States. And I'm going to call this Columbus, the colonies, and the Continental Congress. So there's lots of controversy today. And in fact, one of our kind of thematic questions as we have conversation is Columbus Day something that we should be celebrating? And I've chosen to take a quote from your When Worlds Collide reading that you should have done already. That's just asking us to think about this in a slightly different way. So here's the part, it's toward the end of the article. Because of what happened in 1492, life in much of the world has never quite been the same. Not everyone will find this an occasion to celebrate, but it was indisputably one of the great divides in human history, an event to marvel at and to learn from. What they mean by that are this exchange of ideas and goods and peoples that literally transform the world as we know it. You watched a video on kind of this from a scientific perspective, this spread of fauna and plant life and foodstuffs and ideas transforming like the way that groups of people lived, endemic diseases and global exchange of peoples and religions and all sorts of things will follow, but it literally transforms the way that we live. What will come from that awareness, though, is a quick settlement of the 13 original colonies in what will become the United States. And then we're going to talk about how the consequences and kind of rules associated with colonization lead us fairly quickly to warfare. We've covered this piece before, but I did it very, very quickly, so I'm going to do it again. So here we go, screen and a half today. Throughout the 1600s and 1700s, more British colonies in North America were founded, each for very different reasons. In 1632, King Charles I granted land north of Chesapeake Bay to George Calvert, the first Lord of Baltimore. Calvert's son Cecil, the second Lord Baltimore, named the colony Maryland after Queen Henrietta Maria, Charles's wife. And in 1663, King Charles II awarded a group of key supporters the land between Virginia and Spanish Florida, a territory that would become known as the Carolinas. In 1732, an English philanthropist named James Oglethorpe, along with several associates, received a charter for a colony he hoped would be a haven for those imprisoned for debt. Oglethorpe named his colony Georgia after King George II. Few debtors actually came to Georgia, and the British Crown assumed direct control of the colony by 1752. By that time, the Crown had begun to exercise more and more control over colonial economies and governments, which is going to be the beginning of this transition toward conflict. The 13 British colonies existed primarily for the benefit of England. The colonies exported to England a rich variety of raw materials such as lumber, furs, and in return, they imported the manufactured goods that England produced. The 13 original colonies that became the original United States were founded over a period of 125 years. Together, the colonies represented a wide variety of peoples, skills, motives, industries, resources, and agricultural products. Beginning in the 16th century, the nations of Europe competed for wealth and power through a brand new economic system called mercantilism. Some people say mercantilism, in which the colonies played a really critical role. According to the theory of mercantilism, a nation could increase its wealth and power in two ways: by obtaining as much gold and silver as possible, and by establishing a favorable balance of trade, in which it sold more goods than it bought. A nation's ultimate goal was to become self-sufficient so that it did not have to depend on any other country for its goods. The key to this process was the establishment of colonies. Colonies provided products, especially raw materials, that could not be found in the home country. In 1651, England's Parliament, the country's legislative body, moved to tighten control over colonial trade by passing a series of measures known as the Navigation Acts. These acts enforced the following rules. No country could trade with colonies unless the goods were shipped in either colonial or English ships. All vessels had to be operated by crews that were at least 3/4 English and/or colonial. The colonies could export certain products, including tobacco and sugar, and later rice, molasses, and fur, only to England. And almost all goods traded between the colonies and Europe first had to pass through an English port. The system created by the Navigation Acts obviously benefited England. It proved to be good for many colonists as well. By restricting trade to English or colonial ships, the act spurred a boom in colonial shipbuilding industry and helped support the development of numerous other colonial industries. Whatever their form of charter, by the mid-1700s, most colonies were similar in the structure of their governments. In nearly every colony, a governor appointed by the crown served as the highest authority. The governor presided over something that amounted to kind of an advisory council, usually appointed by the governor, and a local assembly elected by land-owning white males. The governor had the authority to appoint and dismiss judges and oversee colonial trade. In addition to raising money through taxes, the colonial assembly initiated and passed laws. The governor could veto laws, but did so at his own risk, because in most colonies and the colonial assembly, not the crown paid the governor's salary. So using this power of the purse pretty liberally, the colonists influenced the governor in a variety of ways, from the approval of laws to the appointment of judges. The colonies were developing a taste, though, for self-government that would ultimately create the conditions for rebellion. A British mercantilist named Nehemiah voiced one of the few early concerns when he warned his compatriots about the colony's growing self-determination in 1707. He said, "The time may come when the colonies may become populous, and with the increase of arts and sciences, strong and politic, forgetting their relation to their mother country, will then confederate and consider nothing further than the means to support their ambition of standing on their own legs." Aside from the desire for more economic and political breathing room, the colonies had little in common that would unite them against Britain. In particular, northern and southern colonies were developing pretty distinct societies based on sharply contrasting economic systems. So despite their differences, there's going to be a growing sense of a desire for independence, in part because the Navigation Acts develop slowly over time. And so as time goes on, the colonies who don't have those Navigation Acts in place at the beginning, they start to develop a trade system. with other countries and with each other. And slowly but surely, they begin breaking the rules as far as not creating finished products in the colonies themselves. So a growing kind of economic system is developing. When the British decide that they're going to slowly but surely crack down on that system, the problem is that somebody's already been granted freedom and gotten a taste for independence. So it'd be kind of like, this is the way I always describe it to my classes, if your parents left, they left you here now and left you at home to kind of fend for yourself, and they moved to sunny Florida. After a couple of years of you kind of fighting and creating a situation in which you were taking care of yourself and growing more independent, so maybe, you're not giving yourself a bedtime curfew. Your parents call from afar. So after 2 or 3 years of you kind of fending for yourself, they call from afar and they say, we think that your grades are suffering. We want you to be home by 9 from now on. Chances are, because you have a taste for independence and because they're so far away that they can't actually hold you accountable to it, chances are you're not going to listen. And that's kind of what the mother country of the British were doing to these colonies. They'd given them a taste of freedom, kind of left them alone. They developed on their own. And then all of a sudden they stepped in and through these navigation acts decided that they were going to clamp down on the colonies. When that happens, when the navigation acts, which start off with simple rules and gradually become more and more complicated, when that starts to happen, colonial rebellions begin to occur, or at the very least, people begin to meet and formulate thoughts about becoming independent. This is going to transition into our video on the Story of Us revolution, and how on July 2nd through the 4th, we have all of the colonial governments meeting in Philadelphia and deciding to form the very first Continental Congress and deciding to draft the Declaration of Independence. That will lead, of course, to an American Revolution, which I think is better understood via video clip because there's far more visuals there. Okay. We're going to transition now to the Story of Us revolutions. And the video has, I believe, around between 12 and 15 questions in it. Please make sure you're listening really carefully, and before you click an answer, rewatch if you're not sure about an answer. Thank you.